Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. Mr. Geekus, the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I thank the chair, and I join in the welcome that has been proffered to the Attorney General to these proceedings. Many of us on this panel, as you've probably discerned by now, are former prosecutors, and we have a kind of a feel for the process that was undertaken from beginning to end, because part of the responsibility in a criminal action is to prepare for the eventual court proceeding and final process in the justice system that we have. In that regard, I wanted to focus on something. When you came on board as Attorney General was sworn in, who was the U.S. Attorney in the Waco area? My information is that was the Western District of Texas. Is that correct?
Mr. Ederer.
Yes. And our information also, that you can confirm, is that he was instrumental in the preparation of the search warrant and the affidavits and the consultations with the judge in that in this case. Is that correct?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know that?
I don't know whether he was personally instrumental or not.
Well, when you issued your order to, or directive or announcement about dismissing or asking for the resignations of U.S. attorneys, did that include Mr. Lederer?
What we did when we asked for the resignation of U.S. attorneys was to take each case on a case-by-case basis to make sure that there was an orderly transition and that nothing was impacted. One of the first questions that I raised was the issue of Waco, to make sure that there was an orderly transition.
Was that based on the severity of the case or the importance to the public of the case? There were criteria apparently that you utilized in asking him to stay on?
The criteria that I utilized in each instance was to make sure that there was no interruption in ongoing matters that would be affected by a U.S. attorney leaving if there was going to be an interim U.S. attorney appointed. Subsequently, concern was expressed by people at the scene. I sent Mark Richards from the Criminal Division to Waco to personally meet with everybody concerned to make sure that we had the best prosecution presence available on the scene to properly handle the matter.
So the reports you got back from Mr. Richards was to the effect that he should be requested to stay on, or that he could stay on. Is that it?
What we discussed with Mr. Richards, and he is here and can go into more detail, was we reviewed it to see what experienced prosecutor should be assigned on the trial prosecutor who would actually handle it, who had had extensive experience. The recommendation of the Criminal Division was that that would be Mr. Ray Yan. I believe the last name is spelled J-A-H-N, who had had extensive experience, as I recall, in the prosecution of a case involving the murder of a federal judge. Based on all the conclusions, everybody's discussions with the FBI, with local prosecutors, with people on the scene, Mr. Richards met with Mr. Ederer and people on the scene. We determined that Mr. Ray Yan would be the person that would lead the prosecution at the scene.
In Mr. Lederer's jurisdiction, you're saying?
Yes, Mr. Yan, as I understand it, was an assistant United States attorney in Mr. Ederer's office. And
Mr. Lederer would be staying on?
That was going to be addressed as we went along, but we felt very comfortable with Mr. Yan being on the scene and being the person directly involved in the prosecution of the case.
Was Mr. Lederer relieved during that time? I mean, was he not supposed to focus on this incident while Mr. Yan was doing his?
Mr. Yan was going to be the person directly on the scene, handling it directly, coordinating with the Texas Rangers, with local prosecutors, with everybody involved on the scene, since Waco was somewhat removed from San Antonio.
So if a new search warrant or other affidavit or other legal process would have to be confronted at the initial stage, it would have been presented by the FBI or ATF to Mr. Yan at that time, or
to Mr. Yan and the person who had been at the scene, whose name, as I recall, is David Johnson, or Johnston. who was the Assistant United States Attorney on the scene. Which prosecutor personally handled the search warrant, I'd have to refer you to ATF, and we will be happy to furnish you with the information as to who assisted in the original search warrant from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Is Mr. Lederer still on duty?
It's Ederer, as I recall.
Lederer.
E-D-E-R-E-R.
Oh, Ederer.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
E-D-E-R-E-R, as I recall.
Is he? I guess I didn't catch. Maybe I didn't ask it correctly. Is he still now the U.S. Attorney for that district?
I don't know. I'd be happy to furnish you that information to see whether he has resigned at this point or not.
On another quick matter,
I'm told that he is still there.
Just to follow up to conclude that portion of it, when the decision was made that his resignation should not be requested, I take it, you can confirm it one way or another, that part of the reason that he was not asked to resign in your general conclusion about the transition which you described, the importance of the case, the public attention to which had been drawn to it, and the general circumstances of the high visibility of that case. Is that correct?
That would be one of the factors, sir.
I have no further questions.